This week on your Old School RuneScape update, the Winter Summit paints a picture of Old School's future. We highlight Varlamore and quests, including the iconic Defender of Varrock and while Guthix sleeps. We also set out to sea and take a peek at the engine and client updates on the horizon. This is the Old School RuneScape update, episode 11, recorded Saturday, January 21st, 2024. The sunny winter. Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Old School RuneScape update. This week a bit later, a day later than usual, but there's good reason for that, isn't there, Sirion? Isn't there?
Yes. I had other commitments.
Oh, come on. No, we're talking about the Winter Summit 2024 as the good reason.
Right.
Because we would have only had... Because the Winter Summit would have been happening at the time we normally record this, and we wouldn't have had time to digest it before going to record. But yes, you were...
But aren't we so good that we don't need that time at all?
I mean, you can say that. I'm not going to say that. But in any case, yeah, he did have a prior commitment of something called a volleyball match for the folks who are unaware that Sirion plays volleyball. Yes, this is not a sports podcast. We're here to talk about Old School's Winter Summit. Follow along, full show notes at update.show/OS. You can find me in game at Shane12088. Sirion with a C. That's gonna be my intro for you until you give me an embarrassing story to tell each and every week.
Okay.
I can't believe you never told me an embarrassing story before.
I'm very good at not telling those. Because they're embarrassing. So
on the RS3 show, we had somebody who would appear on the show, and the first time he appeared on the show, he did it for a contest, a Valentine's Day contest, where he got married in game. Yeah,
that's a story indeed.
Yeah, and the interesting thing was that was his best friend in real life. So. We had lots of fun and laughter about that, so we like it. We like a story like that. But in any case, we also have the friends chat, BitsBytes, and the community Discord at update.show/Discord. But I think what we all want to talk about this week is the Winter Summit, and I feel like there was a lot of in some parts of the community there was lots of pie in the sky, ideas of what could be announced here. But I feel like what we got was all relatively expected and within the bounds of where the Old School project is currently heading.
Yeah. It was just more of a keynote, I think. Than,
Yeah. And, it wasn't anything that was we're adding a new skill beyond sailing. We're completely reworking this skill, and oh, by the way, we're starting a new quest arc. It was pretty much steady as she goes, updates on sailing, updates on the next area expansion, Varlamore coming in, and a couple of quests. And I think we want to start with Varlamore here because that's something we've been talking about on the podcast as we got some of the dev blogs for it. But we got a deeper look at it this week with the Winter Summit on here, and when it comes to actual Old School content that's built for the game, I think we or at least I have made it clear on the podcast that this sort of content that kind of follows the mold that Corrin did is something that I'm 100% here for with Old School, and this what we saw in the Winter Summit really reinforced that.
Yeah, they were talking about, it's like a mix between Roman and Aztec culture. I'm like, yes, I'm so here for that. That to me is relatively underexplored material in a lot of fantasy games, I think, and MMOs specifically. So I love that they're taking a departure here and that they're trying something new, and the savannah is going to be a new biome. we haven't seen in old school yet, or all of RSV, all of RSV, all of RuneScape. I can't talk. So that to me, it's great, and just I took a look at the world map earlier, and it looks good. Like, it looks exciting, and if you compare it to some of the other parts of the world, I think it shows how far we've come in using the limited resources to shape relatively natural looking worlds, despite the fact that everything needs to be very much on a grid, and we have limited textures and all that. But it looks so much better than other parts of the world. So I'm excited to explore it.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. I think it's and this is something that they talked about in the Quest announcements, and also the discussion about the HD client, which we'll talk about after, is that this is a refined old school experience, and they're effectively implementing it. Isn't that they know what old school is, and they can deliver that, and very confidently too, because Varlamore is one of the only two pieces of content here in the Winter Summit that was announced that has an actual date behind it. Otherwise, we got seasons like spring, summer, etc.
Yeah.
Whereas, we're going to get the first batch of this content here on March 20th, which, when you put it in the grand scheme of things, with everything in between where we're at now and that, it's really not that far away.
No.
And
no, it's great. And one of the things I've always like, back when I was studying and learning about technology and making games and all that, one of the things we learned was the cycles of game consoles, right? So each new console is meant to bring like a whole new, graphics chip and nicer graphics. You get this sort of next gen talk going on. But even if you look within a single generation of consoles, the difference in games they can make between the start and the end, and it all comes down to developers just start knowing how to optimize the heck out of this, how to stretch the tools that they have until the absolute maximum. And I think Varlamore shows that exact same thing with old school, right? Like, they're at the point
that's
where
an interesting way. That's an interesting way of putting it, as in, old school is the game console, and this is, stretching the bounds of that.
Exactly. To like and I don't think they've reached the limit yet. I mean, again, we're gonna talk about the engine. I'm like, what? They can do this? So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and I've always felt that, and maybe this is reflecting on old school, and people can, take it for what it's worth. I've always felt with game consoles that if you wanted the premium experience of playing a game, you get a game console, because that doesn't mess up. It's going to work well, and everything that you get that runs on it is going to fit within the bounds of that console. And the reason I'm saying this is that the old school content all fits within what the game engine and what the game client is capable of, yet at the same time you have, the most hideous area I can think of in the Soulsbane quest, right? You have that operating, but at the same time you have new and interesting things like this Varlamore continent. You have things like the Isle of Souls, as we saw, just so many interesting things like that. And maybe that's the thing in terms of looking through all this. Maybe this is the shining leaf that I want to pull on most now that you mention this. But I did notice that when I was looking at your notes, you used an emoji, and normally we don't see emojis in our show notes, and the emoji here is a frowny face next to there being only one quest.
Yeah, I want more quests. I mean, I know I'm maybe a little bit demanding.
Well, to be fair, the sense that I got is we're going to get more quests with Batch 2.
Yes, exactly. So, it's I don't mean it in any negative way. I am sure we'll get more lore. I'm very impatient for the lore, in a sense. Like, I really want to explore that culture. I really want to explore some of the mythology of that world, not just the politics, though that will also be interesting. and I don't like waiting for it. So that's that's my main thing here, to be honest.
Yeah,
But
and I mean, in theory, if you wanted to be pedantic about it, you could say that there's two quests. We've already done one of them, Children of the Sun.
yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
But
But like,
that was an introduction at its core.
yeah, but like even looking at just the notes, I don't think. I mean, we're gonna get like some big PVM content with Varlamore Part 1, but the thing that strikes me most looking at like all the content that's gonna come is that Varlamore is really a big skilling update. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and looking through it and reading between the lines, you wouldn't normally think that, but I think especially when you look at a number of the things and how even the combat pieces of content have been positioned, I think we could say that.
I mean, like I think it's important to see a lot of these scaling updates in the context of the wider discussion as well. Like there wasn't a lot of talk about Project Rebalance on the Winter Summit. Maybe my biggest disappointment with the whole summit, but
Well,
I'm sure it's gonna get enough attention.
We'll take this. Look at it this way. The way I see Project Rebalance is that if it's something that's going to be improving game integrity and game health as a whole, that's really not something you talk about. It's something like the Winter Summit.
Yeah.
Because that's going to come out regardless.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's going to come when it's done and when it's good, right? Like that's not a thing. Like that's something that's a little bit less.
And to be fair, a lot of the Project Rebalance things we talked about a couple weeks ago, were very in the weeds when it came to numbers, and that kind of content doesn't really present that well on screen.
No, exactly. But like just going back to the skilling updates of Varlamore, if you look at like the mining updates, you cannot see that independent from the discussion we had around the stars, right? The shooting stars.
Yeah.
The fact that they're building like a low intensity mining training method, which
is wonderful, because what was the number one thing I complained about and have complained about so far in the game?
A lot of mining, I think.
Yeah, all of mining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and like same with like prayer, like I think prayer could do with like a little bit more interesting content, but like the biggest deal, like the big elephant in the room, or should I say, I can't, colorful birds. I forgot the name. Quetzals, I think. In the room is the Hunter Guild, of course, and I had a little bit of thinking about it earlier. Like, is a guild really going to fix a skill that has, if you think about it, very little utility?
Right.
And now we get
I just want to
get a guild that. Oh, go for it.
I just want to say one thing before we go into this about where Hunter is, and this was at the general, Jagex RuneScape 20th anniversary celebration. There was a panel with J-Mods talking about big regrets, and Mod Mark said one of his regrets was that Hunter came into the game and wished Hunter was deleted. So there's a lot of sway on both sides of Hunter, both in terms of what the skill represents for some people from the animal trapping side, but also from the technical side, like you said, is that where is the utility of the hunter skill, and why do we have it, right?
Yeah, where does it fit? And my favorite the Hunter Guild is that it basically turns into Skilling Slayer, right? It's now
oh Lord.
Slayer for skilling. Like the rumors are a little bit like that, but I think I sort of convinced myself more in favor of how a Hunter Guild could fix an entire skill. Is that I think the main problem that Hunter has right now is that it lacks utility in the game. There is really nothing you get out of Hunter that you really need. Like the bird's nest are great.
Yeah.
But that's just about the only.
Hunter provides wow moments through implings if you can barehanded catch them.
Yes, and Chin Chompas are good for range training. Like there's some niche use cases, but by and far it is a pretty useless skill. This could change that. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if the Hunter meats will be enough to lift Hunter up into an actual useful skill, but at the very least, it's a good first step.
Yeah, and I mean
So
it's a bit of an experimentation too, I think.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say cautionary optimism there.
Yeah. What about the moths?
Moths?
Yeah, the hunter
Remind me.
moths. So
Remind me.
they function like butterflies. They use a butterfly net and jar, with assuming you have the level, and they bestow buffs up to a random 3 players in a 3x3 radius around you with one of the effects. In that the sunlight moth gives you 6 plus 20% of a player's reduced stats, as well as 8 hit points, and the moonlight moth gives you 5 plus 10% of a player's level in prayer points.
I mean, it could be interesting.
So it's like an AOE burst kind of thing in a 3x3 grid around.
Yeah, that
you.
sounds like an interesting group PVM addition.
So it's kind of like, imagine you had a potion that could be used as AOE, but it's not, a potion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now imagine these things actually becoming useful, and all of a sudden Hunter becomes a moneymaker. Like, mind blown, right? Like, that would be great, I think.
Yeah. Antelopes give sunlight horns and sunlight meat. The moonlight antelopes give moonlight variants of this, and the sunlight horns are used to upgrade the hunter's crossbow into a sunlight hunter's crossbow and bolts for the upgraded version. So they're kind of ecosystem creating with this in kind of the same way that farming and herblore ecosystem each other, I think, which is good.
Yeah, and I think I like that it is a way, like, it's not going to be replacing monster drops,
No.
but in a sense, it is feeding into, like, the combat ecosystem by giving Hunter interesting drops, and that might just about be enough to make it interesting again.
So let's just forget the Hunter Guild here is being talked about. Without the Hunter Guild in game, what's the most interesting part of Hunter? Right? See?
Yeah. I mean, there's some training methods. I think it's like the drift net fishing, for example. I haven't given that a try yet myself. Like, there's a few things like that, but it's very one-off in a corner somewhere, single piece of content.
Yeah. And on the whole, I think both Varlamore batches are probably my second favorite thing to come out of the summit here. On this one, well, I'll tell you when we get.
You say both batches. I think we should talk about the other batch then for a moment.
Yeah. And I was kind of grouping the two of them here together. But which one in batch 2 stands out to you? Because the one thing that I saw in the summit here with batch 2 is that we're not getting too much information about this because it's a ways out. But they're still talking this up because it's coming summer 2024.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the fact that they're saying, like, new herblore content, love it. That to me is like, yes, give me more things to do with herblore. I like potion making. I think that's a pretty solid start, but I would love for there to be more uses for that skill than just that one thing.
Right, as in you're talking about adding like an entirely new loop for it, or
even just like an integration. Like, for example, you have like attack, or not, just like potion mixes, right? Like the barbarian herblore training. I don't know who generally. I don't think I've ever seriously used it myself. Right?
No.
Like the one where you put caviar or roe into a potion.
Because the idea behind that was that it was like a potion and food combined with each other.
Yeah,
but you're not getting either to their max benefit.
No, exactly. So I don't think, but like something like, even if it's sort of integrated like that, I think it's fine. Like divine potions, for example, which we got with dinners, is pretty cool. I hope it's a little bit more special like that, but I hope it's also not completely removed from the core loop.
Okay, that's fair. And I feel like herblore is one of the things that people have really come to expect as being the skill's identity, is that, hey, it's the potion making skill, right? And we accept that, and the uniqueness of herblore comes from the different potions that you're able to make. So you don't necessarily need to break the mold on that, but having an extra training method or, quality of life feature around it isn't necessarily a bad thing because, hey, if you're short on money, herblore can be expensive.
And even in the context of like an Iron Man, right? Like if you think about it, like you do a lot of herblore training, you end up with all these potions that you will probably never use up. Like it's sort of independent at that point, right? Like the potions you need might not necessarily be the best one to train, and you have to gather a lot of herbs to even get that training. So I think it could fit in the ecosystem in many different ways, providing like a more cost-effective way to train, but also just
that's fair.
What's going to be an interesting effect, like if this becomes a really popular training method, there will be fewer people making potions, and potion like that might become cheaper as a consequence, right? Because now maybe making potions even becomes profitable is probably unlikely.
I doubt that.
But that balance might shift a little bit as well. So this could make a pretty big change to the herblore ecosystem, and I'm all for it. Like, let's mess it up, right? Let's disrupt it. Let's disrupt the market.
Yeah, maybe, or maybe not if we're good with how the herb prices are for those of us who like farming herbs, right?
Just make sure you get all the money you need before summer 2024.
Yeah. We're also getting a new group boss in part 2, and something we don't normally talk about all that often here on the show is his group PVM, because we're really not I don't know what your plans are for PVM if you're planning to do the group PVM, but I don't think I am. So this will be interesting to see when this arrives and where it lands, if it's something I want to dip my feet into. But I don't really plan to PVM that much this year.
We'll see where we get there.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. All in all,
Varlamore
is looking good.
Very, very nice.
The one thing I'm sad of, like the part of Varlamore I'm really excited to see is I think it's the floating city it's called, because it has the College of Bards. I love to see what they did do with that. That to me sounds like just so many good hooks and options for like quests and content and storylines and world building. So gonna have to wait for at least part 3, maybe even longer for that. But other than that, it looks good. My one hope and my one concern is that it's going to be integrated with the world. Like, obviously, there's a lot of reason why this region is sort of detached from the rest of the world, because they have been very isolationist for a long time. But I do hope we get like fairy rings and maybe like a spirit tree patch, or like things like, or maybe even an eagle like location. That would be thematic, right? That would really integrate it nicely in the world. I've not seen a lot of evidence that this is happening. So that would be sort of my big worry. But other than that,
that's fair. And it's interesting coming from the fact that this is attached to the Corund continent and the Western continent and whatnot, right? Now, here's an interesting exercise, and this will probably be the last thing on this. Imagine there's a future game mode for old school here, where rather than starting in Mistlin with Lumbridge, you start somewhere over here. And then your goal is that you progress outward by unlocking things.
They did that with, I believe it's either the Twisted League or the Shattered Relics one. I think it's probably Shattered Relics, where everybody was current restricted.
Okay, but there was no opportunity to head eastward then.
Nope, it was just current.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean that's a good way to show off the continent, but I think it'd be interesting if you could progress east on that. But speaking of east, Varrock, Defender of Varrock, potentially arriving in game in February. One of the backported quests that is being pulled with the Gigapoll following the Winter Summit here, and they made special note that, hey, yeah, this is a backported quest brought in from backups from around the era when Old School initially was salvaged. But there's going to be a number of quality of life changes to it and a few changes along the way. And my sense with Defender of Varrock was that it was mostly going to be quality of life changes to make it feel and work as though it comes out in 2024 rather than 2008, compared to actually, changing major story beats like the other quests that we'll talk about. Well, what's the chuckling for?
Yeah, no. I'm just the other quest that we're going to talk about.
I know. Everybody wants to talk about it, but let's get this one out of the way first. With Defender of Rock, we know what that other one is, obviously. Yeah. But
Defender of Varrock is a weird one for me because I have basically no memory of it. I think this was just about the time when I was still doing quests with guides. Gasp, yes, I know it. I'm sorry. So it never really stuck to me as like a lore quest, even though, of course, it does set up a bunch of things.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, clearly they're doing something slightly differently because it requires the Camdozal quest.
Below Ice Mountain.
Yeah, below Ice Mountain. So they're going to integrate some of the old school specific beats, or at least probably. But yeah, this is one of those things. It feels there's nothing to write home about, right? Like it's exciting for people who've never really played RS3 and are really discovering RuneScape through an old school exclusive lens. For them, it's going to be really exciting. But I feel for me, like I'm like, stop doing that. Give me more Varlamore. Give me more continents. Give me the floating city, right? And so, yeah, I'm reasonably indifferent.
Okay. That's important. That's important that you say that, because I feel ambivalent towards both these quests as well. And maybe that's why. Because I've been going back and forth now for 24 hours about whether or not I vote yes or no to both these quests.
Look, like I said, I don't think it's bad content. I think because we know how many more people play old school compared to RS3. That's a fact. And don't you go down in the comment section saying, yeah, but they're all bots. Do please go into the comment section, but say something nice. But I lost my train of thought. Oh,
you're talking about bots and
like many more players. They will never play RS3, and if it's a relatively simple thing to just put a quest in a game because it's mostly already done, it's surely going to be less work than doing a quest from scratch. Why not?
Yeah,
it makes sense. And like on behalf of the people who get to play this for the first time because they don't play RS3, I'm all for it. I will vote for it because I think, great, fine.
Yeah, to be fair, Defender of Varrock is not the one I have the issue with, to be honest, right? And
should we quickly talk about the armored zombies?
Yeah, the armored zombies and the axe, because armored zombies were, the bread and butter for training beyond, that level 60, 70 into the 80 range with that. Mm-hmm. And, it'll be interesting to see if those come into the game, what people use for those. But we're also getting the zombie axe, which is designed to be a weapon that sits in between the dragon scimitar and abyssal whip, which I think is wonderful, because I'm right there right now, and I don't know if I was talking to you or somebody else this week, and I was like, where's the intermediate strength weapon after dragon scimitar?
I mean, we haven't done Monkey Madness, so we are sort of losing out on the scimitar, unfortunately. So I've been making do with dragon.
I prefer long swords.
I would have liked a semi, but hey, I got my whip now. I'm all good. Yeah, no, I like it. I think it's good. I think it's a good place for a drop, honestly. like it. It's a good quest reward.
Yeah, and it's gonna
drop.
be primarily a slash and crush weapon, which I think is good. No stab options. It's got a -3 stab attack bonus, which I mean is fine, given the fact it's this big honkin' axe with this. So,
I think it sits well, right? Like we would,
and
we
I
were
mean a
talking,
melee
like, you were
strength
talking
bonus
about,
of 107. So that's nice.
yeah. Because we were talking about the dragon mace, and like it just doesn't have the crush bonus. So having like a nice little
No, it
mix
doesn't. I think it's like a 60, a level 6. I think it's plus 60 in terms of crush. Let me just look this up right now, because after Leagues ended, my sole existence for a good amount of time on old school has been at the crabs, just bringing up the melee combat stats. And yeah, right now, Dragon Mace has a plus 60 crush bonus, and going up to this axe from there, that's a nice upgrade, 60 to 100. So I like that, and it's going to give people another reason to go to the armored zombies, in addition to the XP that they're going to be able to give. So
yep.
All right. Well, Guthix sleeps. Iconic, yes.
That's the word that they kept using.
Yeah, and I was a little bit surprised, and maybe they'll save this for the quest when it gets there, and maybe they didn't want to spoil it for people who haven't done it. Temple Desecrated is one of, I think, the all-time best RuneScape music tracks. We'll have to wait to see if it works.
Shane's talking about RuneScape music?
I mean, it was one of the first most iconic quest tracks out there. So I'm waiting to see if that makes its way in, if this quest comes. But I feel, and this is my RS3 side talking, the events that were set up in While Guthix Sleeps laid out the dominoes to the 6th age. And what I have done following this is I went in and I completely caught myself up with all of Mod Ed's lore Q&As on this, and what he has effectively said on this is that right now there is no intention to follow that same path. They can continue telling different stories about what the characters would do after certain events, like While Guthix Sleeps, if there's no god influence on the world. And I am reasonably confident that the dominoes that were put in place on the RS3 side after While Guthix Sleeps won't be happening on old school, specifically because they also said that the goal for this is to, not even, they're not even going to copy the existing version of Ritual, the Majorat that was done. They're going to do their own Majorat finale based off of what we have on the one arc of While Guthix Sleeps, and on the other arc that's presently where it's at with Desert Treasure 2. So I'm not worried about that anymore going into this. And I feel like this is, like you said, an iconic quest, just as Defender of Varrock was. And people are going to get to experience it for the first time. I'm just not over the hump yet to say yes to this in the poll. And, granted, maybe I shouldn't even have a say. Because I don't have the requirements right now. I haven't done the rest of the Majorat quests that are in game presently. Maybe I shouldn't have a say in this, but that's just how I feel right now.
I mean, I think this is a long discussion, and I think we can't have this discussion properly without
doing the quest.
Without doing all of the Majorat quests. But I disagree that While Guthix Sleep set up the dominoes to the gods returning in RS3. I think there might be some relations, as in they both affected Majorat, and the motivation as to, can I spoil RS3 quests on this show?
Yeah, you should. And to be clear, I'm not gonna harp on this point any more than I already have, because the quest needs to stand on its own.
Sure. one of the reasons why Sliska might have done the things he did in the World Wakes that he did is motivated by the events of Ritual of the Majorat.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like that much is true. Like I think it's maybe a prerequisite. But on the other hand, it's not the only consequence and not a necessary consequence. I think there's other stories you can tell that come out of it, and you can tell those stories without doing the quest requirements dance that RS3 is having to deal with right now, with sort of quest lines resetting the quest requirements because it's much more of a living game and living thing.
Yeah, it
All that
operates in
together
seasons.
makes all of that makes me think that Ritual of the Majorat is going to be much closer to an actual conclusion.
Right, and it's gonna tie in the threads that started on both sides of this, because you got, different, Majorats coming together, and they introduced them, in their own introductory little quests on that way.
Yes.
And we've kind of already started that, and there needs to be some kind of recap before we get into the lore of all this Guthix sleep stuff before we get there. But yeah, maybe I'll vote yes.
My only worry is, like, they've been saying it's so iconic, it's so great, right? Like, everybody loved this quest.
Yeah.
My big worry is that I think big reason why this has cemented itself into the memory of people in a very positive way is it was the first time it tried something of this skill.
Right, and it also granted the dragon plate body, which we already have. But we're going to get
that's
other
not why
things
people remember. That's not why what people remember it for. I
the
think.
tormented demons.
Sure. But I'm talking about the scope of the quest and the scale of the quest itself. Like, for the longest time, like, whenever we got applications at Clan Quest, which is a questing clan, and we asked people for their favorite quest, like, at least half the time, While Guthix Sleeps was their favorite quest. And I think the skill had something to do with it. It was unique. It was new. In old school, we've already had this skill before. We've seen Desert Treasure 2, for example. Even A Kingdom Divided, I think, falls into the same boat. Like, it's big story beats. So the question is, can such a outdated quest still match that emotional impact?
Right.
That quest had to
and I think that's a fair discussion, because when you and I play this will also be new for us, because it's not just 100% backport. They're actually making changes in the storyline to accommodate the path that they're taking on that. So if they can, use some of those things that they're working into it, or some of the things that are being changed about it, I think the answer to that question is a cautiously optimistic yes.
We'll see. I'm voting yes for this. Like I said, I think it deserves to be part of the game. We're getting to the point where maybe they should be calling the quest differently, because they might deviate from the RS3 canon, but all in all,
it doesn't matter. It's the same general.
Exactly.
As long as it's the same general idea, I think it's fine.
The thing I'm really excited about, though, is the rewards, right? Like,
the Dragon Claw changes?
I think they should go to the Tormented Demons.
Yeah, see,
I don't know.
The interesting thing about this is, I was talking this out with you before the show and pre-show, and I said, no, it should remain on the Tombs of Amesket drop table. Then I'm like, okay, but Tombs of Amesket is this really difficult thing. What does it make sense having a level 60 weapon over there when you can put it at something like the Tormented Demons? That's a better, level bracket, and then, obviously deal with the ramifications of moving it off of Tombs of Amesket, but that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, exactly. I think the claws don't make a lot of sense in the tombs thematically. I feel it was put there because they wanted to put the claws in the game, because they're pretty iconic if you think about it.
And interestingly enough, this is a non-binding question on the poll.
Yeah, that makes sense, because they need to consider the impact and the economy.
Oh, sorry, it's
Yeah,
not Tombs of Amazkith, it's Chambers of Zarek that they come from.
gosh, we are such noobs. Okay, Chambers of Xeric. Replace that. We'll put like a little AI generated voice over our own voices. So it's
I've been
like,
waiting to be able to do something like that.
ah! No, like a really bad text to speech voice.
No,
That's
I'm
way
not.
funnier.
I'm sorry. I'm not diving that deep into the editing for that on this episode. People just have to accept it for what it is.
All right. I think the reward that I was most excited by when I heard this, I was like, yes, this makes so much more sense than Ruinous Powers. It's got alignments.
You're gonna have to sell me on this.
The thing with Ruinous, like, we talked about this on the show before when they scrapped Ruinous Powers.
Yeah.
And I think back in the day you agreed with me, right? Like,
I
it
did.
is really hard to come up with a set of prayer things that are not outright an improvement over the current prayer book. You want to have horizontal content.
Yeah.
But that's really hard because the current prayer book really kind of covers everything you want. It's really hard to get around, like, blocking all melee damage, blocking all incoming melee damage, right? Like, ever since we got 43 prayer, our questing has become like a million times easier because that prayer is a must-have. How are you gonna come up with content that is as good as that? It's not better, it's not worse. RS3 gave up and made it better, right? Like, I have not used standard prayers there in years. And you don't really want that.
Yeah, that's true.
The fact that now they're basically saying, you know what? Let's make these prayers better, but let's put them at a higher level on top of the existing books. And let's find some niche use cases for each.
So they're almost like branching prayers then within the same prayer book.
Yeah.
That's a good way of looking at it.
Exactly. So I could, like, they're talking about rights of balance, I think. Great name. I could see that being focused around, sort of cost benefits, right? Like, maybe you block all damage, but or you recoil damage that you blocked, but also, I don't know, lose more prayer points, right? Like, lose a part of it. Balance, right? Super cool theme. You come up with just 4 prayers that do very specific things. Then you pick some of the ruinous powers and you do some things.
And see, they're also talking about the potential of having Zarosian themed ones that could be as a reward from Desert Treasure too.
Mm-hmm. It would replace ruinous powers, and I think it's a great solution. I was thinking, give me some Badosian prayers, like all offense, no defense, basically, right? Like, give me some prayers that only work.
That's an interesting idea. Then, from that angle, is that you have your 3 combat styles, right? And then, based off of that, you go one step further, and you're able to say, I want to then, tailor my melee experience just a little bit by using a different set of prayers, like the rites of balance.
Like, here's an off the cuff idea for the Bandos prayers, right? Have a Bandos have some prayers that get more powerful the less armor you wear.
Yeah.
But to me, that fits perfectly with Bandos.
It does.
Right?
It does.
And like, it sounds like such a cool little trade-off. And I am almost seeing this as relics light, right? It's tiny tweaks.
That's a bit of
gameplay.
I don't know if you should say that word.
I know, but like, it's like a little tweak to your gameplay. You can sort of pick and choose what you want to do, and you can switch it out. To me, it sounds great, and it doesn't need to replace the entire prayer book. You still get access to those as well. It is a great new reward space, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And once again, non-binding question. They're just a concept at this stage, so we don't know if things are going to go this way. So I realize we're having fun talking about this right now, but let's just, and I'm not saying this to say that we shouldn't get excited about this. I'm just saying this to temper expectations a little bit.
I am excited about it. Like, if Varlamore was not in this list, it would be the thing of the entire Winter Summit I was the most excited about.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
Like the reward space just, oh my, like the fact I can come up with off the cuff ideas left and right that sound like they would be somewhat feasible is a good sign that there's a lot of cool options there.
Indeed. All right, you've just convinced me. I'll vote yes on While Guthix Sleeps and the associated options.
Definitely on the god alignments.
Yes.
Otherwise, I'll come and find you because.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, yeah, I already voted yes on that. I voted yes on that, but definitely the God Alliance. It was that discussion that sold me, and the fact that it's not going to be just a copy paste over from RS3. So, I think thinking about that a little bit has helped. All right.
There's one thing that's not going to be a copy from RS3 because it doesn't exist in RS3.
No, it's sailing.
I find it hard to talk about this because I know that there's a lot of people who are actually excited about it. In theory, I have just not had an opportunity. Like, we need to get someone on the show to convince us about sailing, I feel. Because I'm not convinced, you're not convinced. A lot of people in my clan are not convinced. But yet this skill passed the poll.
It was very narrow between that and shamanism.
Yeah, but then the Greenlight poll on sailing, after they went like in a deep dive, did succeed with a bigger margin than I expected.
Yeah.
I
feel like we'd be doing a disservice to the skill to talk about it in depth right now. The two things I want to say is that based off the roadmap that they put out, I find it very difficult to see where they're at right now.
Look, this is going to be a 2025 release.
Oh yeah,
at earliest. Earliest.
And you know that's fine. That's fine because you got to get it right.
Yeah, I agree.
Right now they're working on core gameplay, navigation, designing the sea, and boarding, moving, and using a ship. And oh god, the GIFs they posted for boarding, moving, and using the ship. I have to say one word comes to mind with that, and you agreed with me on that, and it's jank.
Yeah, I mean, I'm first of all, I need to say I'm incredibly impressed by the fact that they made the engine do this in the first place. The fact that there's people on the ship, you can see other ships, and it all works. I don't want to know the spaghetti goat that exists and that they have to touch to make this all work. I am very impressed. But the skill just doesn't really work. Like, view distance is a problem, right? Like, the boat just pops in while it's right next to you, and it pops out when it leaves right next to you. And
it basically,
to me, it's a bit immersion breaking.
Yeah,
right now.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I don't know why they posted it like they did, but if you look at the pictures they posted and the videos they posted, they're posted on the fixed window client. And honestly, based on what's there, I feel like everything being shown would work better if they were using the resizable window.
Sure, and of course we're getting all the engine improvements that may help with this as well. But yeah, we'll see. Like you said, I think we're doing it a disservice by not talking about it in depth, and I think we need to get someone on board who was sold on the idea to begin with, just to get that voice out there, because I've convinced you of a few things on this show, on this very show already. So perhaps crazier things have happened. I've been convinced of the merits of EOC on the show before, and that's someone must be able to do it with sailing, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, nobody outside of Jagex has touched it, right? And we might have an entirely different experience when we get our hands on a beta. So there's that. But the main thing I think we wanted to say is that sailing was here. We don't know where it's going to be, and I don't feel comfortable talking about it until we get more information on this, because, like you said, this is looking like 2025 at the earliest at this point. So,
oh, for sure, yes.
The Wilderness. Every day I see wilderness updates for Old School. I am reminded that there is a vibrant PvP community in this game.
Yeah.
A community I'm not a part of and have no interest of doing PvP at Old School. But they are bringing out a number of wilderness-themed updates for this, or at least polling them on this. And I think the update that speaks most to the kind of stuff that we're looking at is that, there's changes that are on the way when it comes to the NPCs around the Chaos Temple. There's questions of, what levels of the wilderness sees the most PvP in use. And then we get to these things called adamant seeds, which are like mithril seeds.
Oh, yes.
Except they're going to force walk you in the opposite direction.
Honestly, I wanted to talk about this. I was reading this, and my mouth was basically on my desk, because the fact that people have found a use for mithril seeds to force walk themselves out of a certain tile to get around certain PK situations boggles my mind. And this is the kind of creativity I love to see. I don't have any interest in being part of it myself, but the fact that people are able to use game mechanics in such a way, we tend to call this emergent behavior. It's behavior that's not designed. It's behavior that follows out of the consequences of multiple game systems working together. Great. And the fact that they're leading into this and you know what? Let's make you walk to the other side with these seeds. Love it. To me, that is a really fun addition. It's not game breaking. I don't think it even breaks the meta.
No.
But it adds a fun little... Yeah, it adds a fun little new thing. And honestly, I think a lot of people are in the same boat as you and me, right? We don't PK. We hate PKers because they don't let us go into the wilderness.
Yeah. But there's a question of, maybe is there a way to get more people into the wilderness in terms of the skilling side? Because there's a poll, question number 8, which, the exact details of this stuff is talked about in the wilderness post, but it's, should they work on designs for improvements to the wilderness agility course, wilderness slayer, wilderness resource area, and fountain of ruin to be fleshed out and locked in at a later date? And, I did go back in a bit of history on this, and there seems to be a history where PvP content and wilderness content doesn't pass polls. So it's going to be interesting to watch and see what happens with this.
No, that's where I was going to go next. And I think it's because a lot of the people, that community is a minority. I think a lot of people dislike PKing, mostly because it inconveniences them.
Yeah.
But I think we should give these people the chance to
and
give this content. So I will be voting in favor for the same reason I'm voting in favor of Defender of Varrock, right? Okay.
And see, the thing is, what reason do you have to go into the wilderness?
Actually, there's some really good training. There was actually discussion lately, in our clan chat about it. The Wilderness Slayer tasks are apparently really good money. And good XP.
I should look into that.
The Revenants are a big deal.
Not quite at that level yet.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of content. If you're willing to take the risks, one of the people in the clan was doing one of the bosses, wilderness bosses for Slayer, and they earned millions in just that single task. Right? It's really good money if you're willing to take that risk.
Yeah, and I think that's also what we saw with leagues too, is that, only 2% of the people or so took wilderness, but the people who did it had an entire game that was based around GP, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's an interesting discussion to have on this. We'll have to wait and see if these pass. I'm, like you said, a little bit concerned that they might not, but I feel like we should lend them their vote on this, even if we're not part of that community.
I agree.
All right. There was one more thing with the wilderness stuff. I was going to move on to the next thing, but the chivalry prayer scroll. How do we feel about chivalry potentially being made available through the wilderness?
The reasoning they say in the post, it makes sense. Like, by the time you get chivalry, you almost always already have access to piety. It's pretty much a not so useful thing. I don't really like doing the night waves. Give me another way to unlock it. I'll take it. Let me buy it. I'll throw money at it.
Yeah, that's a good point. You and I both know how I feel about things just being buyable, right? In terms of other things that we won't talk about right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and again, that's another economy of the wilderness creeping its way into the game that we can benefit from. So, but, all right. Yeah, they say this unlock gives lower level players ranging between 40 and 100 combat a slightly improved chance against players who have access to prayers like piety, rigor, and augury. So,
yeah,
it's fine. All right. Last up, the HD client. My favorite part of the Winter Summit. My second favorite part, sorry. First favorite part was Varlamore Part 1.
Yep. Somebody posted a very predictable screenshot from Twitch chat. And I will read this to you verbatim. Is this RS3 or what? Nobody wants this.
But it's not. And see, that's the thing, and this is actually what makes me excited about this, is that everybody has been talking about, is Old School going to get an HD mode, right? And people were thinking that it would look like the 2008 RSHD that the OSHD client is implementing right now. But it's not. What you see when you look at official HD mode is you see a collection of deeper color palettes, different skyboxes, more in-depth lighting that pops. I'd like to actually talk with Zant on the show here. He's one of our RS3 contributors, to see what he has to say about these screenshots and, just the way this kind of leans into the old school graphical identity, because that's something I picked up in terms of, just running around the world in leagues, parts of the world I hadn't been to before, is that Old School has its own unique graphical identity, and you can really see it in the areas that have come out in the last few years, like the Isle of Souls, like Corund and whatnot. And I was always wondering, how would this look in HD? And lo and behold, here we are. They got the sample screenshots.
Yeah, I mean, you tried the unofficial HD client, and I mean, we weren't doing the show back then, but there was like a thing, like a whole problem between Jagex and the HD client, where the HD client was sort of, because they were working on their own HD client, we knew that, and like there was this big thing. But if you look at what Jagex is doing, I'm like, this is next level, because I think
this is better than OSHD and 117 HD.
Yeah, because you used that, right? Like you tried both of them.
Yeah, I've tried both of them, and I've actually just gone back to vanilla RuneLite at this point, because OSHD doesn't support all the plugins, and 117 HD can't render with the GPU on Mac.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, you're gonna get all of that and more. But you were talking about OSHD and how it doesn't run all the plugins.
Oh, I know.
RuneLite runs on the Java client.
Yeah, which, you want to get away from ASAP at this point.
Yeah, because all these HD improvements are in the new C++ client. So, I mean, first of all, I'm happy for it, because I do actually play mobile quite a lot, especially in the last few weeks. And I'm going to get all of these improvements. I'm also going to get all the plugins that the new plugin API is going to unlock. I think that's great. I think I couldn't play without plugins anymore.
Right, and see that's the most absurd thing is that we come into this game thinking I'm not going to use any plugins. I don't need.
Oh, I switched to Rune.
And then boom,
client.
boom. Throughout leagues, I probably added a dozen or so plugins to the list.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see them take that path because it shows that hey, this is exactly where the community wants us to be. And it's going to be like, okay, what are all your plugins going to be when this arrives then? Because I think that's another big thing that we have questions about is what are the plugins in the new client going to look like? Is it going to have an abstraction layer that lets it run RuneLite plugins, or are all those RuneLite plugin developers, which are part of the community, they're all hosted on GitHub, or are all those people going to have to port over to the new client?
That's what worries me, right? Like there are almost too many plugins, and there's going to be a chance that at least some of them will never, like, they are no longer actively developed or supported. So the question is, what is going to happen with those? Like, do you just have to accept? Like, some people will hesitate to move over to the official client as long as they don't get all of the benefits the current one does have, right?
Yeah.
And in my case, like bank tags and bank tag layouts, that's RuneLite storage, right? I'm going to have to reset that up if I ever switch to a completely new plugin ecosystem. So I'm kind of locked into the whole RuneLite thing. So I almost hope that they're going to think about this and be like, you know what, we'll put like a abstraction layer in there. You can just port over all the RuneLite plugins very easily.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. Like the real nice thing about them developing a plugin API, and this comes back to the same as the HD discussion, right? Like without an API, people will find ways around, getting access to the game data, making changes and all that. And the only thing Jagex can do is like, oh, don't cheat and use your best factors.
They can further obfuscate and all that, but
they can further obfuscate
with an API. They invite it.
Well, yeah, with the API, you can basically start saying anything that goes not through the API is illegal. It's not allowed.
Yeah,
it's very obvious at that point what a plugin can and can't do, right? Like right now, you could probably make plugins that do things that Jagex doesn't allow.
Oh, you can. Right? You can. They just aren't greenlit for the RuneLite plugin hub.
Exactly. So it all needs to be done very manually.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry,
removes
continue.
All the ambiguity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that removes all the ambiguity.
Here's our top 10 used plugins on RuneLite right now. Quest Helper, 117, Guardians of the Rift Helper, Tombs of Amoskhet, Zulrah, WikiSync, Banked Experience, Skills Progress, the Gauntlet, and Bank Tag Layouts.
Yeah.
And Quest Helper, 433,000 users.
I mean, bank tag layouts, I miss them so much, right? Like, I have set up, like, ones for farming runs and bird runs, and, like, when I'm on mobile, I'm gonna have to go to all my tabs and click the items individually. Like, I really hope that we get a good plugin ecosystem, but it's a chicken and the egg problem. You need enough players for the plugins to be worth it, because, to be honest, most people who develop plugins are players who have an annoying problem and are just like, I'll fix it myself, right?
Yeah, and to give you an idea, if we're really going to open up this API, you remember when we were first starting off, what I said I need to do to see if we can do this with a plugin, and you're not able to actually change this with the RuneLite plugin API, but I wanted there to be a plugin that would just let me change the font in game.
Yeah.
Give me like a true type rendered font, please.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's something that could be done, because, and this might be my eyesight, it might be my screen, but I honestly find the font hard to read. But that's a topic for a different day, of course. And I would be over the moon if a plugin, or even just the official client, let me change the font in game.
Yeah, but like that's the whole thing, right? You have a problem. You are technically inclined. So you might say, you know what, I'll just write it myself. And that's how a plugin developer's journey starts.
Yes.
And for that, you need people to actually play the game on that platform. So you have sort of a chicken and the egg problem. I'm hoping that Jagex sees this, starts inviting looks at the top 10 plugins, right? And is like, hey, let us help you rewrite those. Then you have the top 10 plugins sorted. Then you have the fact that mobile is a huge deal, right? Like, I think that's actually speaking in their favor right now, because I think mobile, a lot of people do play on mobile and would use a third-party client if they could. I would, but can't. Having plugins there will also be a huge deal. So those might be the saving grace. And if that's the case, I would love to have both my plugins and all those gorgeous HD upgrades.
Yeah, and like I said, after seeing the HD stuff in the summit, I don't want to use 117 or HDOS anymore.
I understand on a rational level why it is possible to make it look great, right? Because all it is just geometry. You just throw a whole new renderer on it, and yes, of course you can do all those beautiful, awesome things. But then I look at it, I'm like, I didn't think that old school could be this pretty.
That's exactly it. Like I would have said the same thing a year ago. So, I just think I just want to say one more thing on the HD stuff. And this is, the second to last paragraph before they get into the whole plugin API business. They said that they've been researching Sky Dome systems, which will allow them to add weather. By adding clouds and other atmospheric effects, they'll craft bespoke lighting settings for all of the different biomes. And no more will the accursed skies of Mauritania look identical to the pleasant, sunny shores of Brimhaven Beach. That's possible. That's possible in this engine that's running old school.
Yep.
So there we have it. That's Winter Summit 2024, folks.
I mean, we skipped on the boss Scurriers, but that's going to come out
because it's coming out
week.
in 3 days, and we're going to talk about it on next show.
Yeah, exactly. So no, we didn't miss anything. We looked at all of it. I mean, as hopefully people can tell, I'm pretty excited about what's coming.
Top 3.
My top 3, Varlamore, specifically part 2, actually.
Okay.
Even though we know very little about it. God alignments.
Okay.
And the engine.
Okay. For me, it's Varlamore part 1, then the engine stuff, and after that, I know it's a bit of a cop-out to say this, because it's 3 days away, but it's the Rat King, because that's specifically what I need right now in terms of combat training.
Yeah, there you go.
So, but
I mean, I have to say though, like overall, I like I said, I had a prior engagement. I couldn't actually watch the Winter Summit live.
No, and I think it's good to it's good to give it time to stew, because you would have got an entirely different reaction from me yesterday than you did today.
But like I wanted it to watch it live, at least to be part of that experience.
Right.
I couldn't.
Okay.
So I haven't watched the entire vault either, but from what I've seen, like the videos they made and produced, especially in collaboration with some of the content creators, it's been one of the best outlets of like a roadmap I've seen Jagex do, period. Like I thought it was all very tightly produced.
It's also just good community management.
And I loved, like, there's a good sense of humor in there, little jokes. There's like a whiteboard in there talking about League 16.
Oh yeah. I did want to mention that before we go. I don't know if you read the whiteboard.
Yeah, I did read. Yeah, give Jad a Glock, right?
No, not that one. Not that one.
Oh,
Enlightened Journey 4.
Ha! Oh, right.
Dungeoneering in space? Question mark?
Yes. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Yeah. No, exactly. I
I'm sorry,
You know,
I just had to point that out.
I think that's the kind of humor I really appreciate. That like that shows like there's a lot of details going into these videos that, to me, show the love the developers have, the passion that they have for this project to put that together. It's great. And in the absence of RuneFest, which not much longer now, but in the absence of RuneFest, I think this is the next best thing.
Right, and so with that, I don't think we'll get a Summer Summit then, because they'll save that for RuneFest. Probably.
I expect so. I mean, the content sort of lines up, right? Like the roadmap sort of ends in summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting times ahead, nonetheless. Of course, if you want to follow us, we're on all the podcast platforms out there. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google, Pocket Casts, and more. Just visit update.show/OS. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/OSRS update. I don't think you need the ad in there, but somebody said that they couldn't get to it without the at symbol. I got to look into why that's the case, but Definitely interesting times ahead. We'll be back next week for another episode where we discuss the Rat King. Anything else before we go?
Nope.
Alrighty then. We'll see you guys next week for another episode of the Old School RuneScape Update. See you then, everyone. Take care.
Bye.